Welcome, Dr. Shabir.
Pleasure to be on.
We've been discussing women's clothing and modesty for a while, Dr. Shabir. We've been looking at different verses one by one. Now we want to look at the last verse, which is from chapter 33, verse 53, and it mentions the word hijab. You know, often when we talk about women's clothing and the scarf that they wear over their heads, we refer to it as hijab. And this verse talks about hijab, so it's pertinent that we bring it up. Very important, actually.
Yes, and in this connection, we should say that the word hijab is used in the Quran 7 times. About 3 of those times, at least 3 of those times, it refers to a kind of a psychological barrier that is there between the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his disbelieving listeners. So God says that between the Prophet and them, there is a barrier, there is a hijab. So this is a kind of a psychological barrier, mental block. There is a barrier between the people of paradise and the people of hell, according to the 7th chapter of the Quran, Bainahuma hijab. In the story of Sulaiman alayhi salam, in the 38th chapter of the Quran, the 32nd verse, there is a mention that Sulaiman alayhi salam was, fascinated with his horses, and then the narrative says, "Hatta tawarat bil hijab." Until it became, or they became screened by the hijab. And they came to be hidden. They went behind the hijab. So what does that mean? Some commentators think that this means that the horses bolted, and as they receded into the horizon, they could no longer be seen because the horizon blocks them. Some think this is a reference to the sun setting, so can no longer be seen past the horizon. So you can see what hijab means. Generally, it means something that blocks you from view. The closest we get to our meaning outside of this verse, having anything to do with a woman's hiding herself, this is in the story of Maryam, in Surah Maryam, the 19th chapter of the Quran, where it says, فَاتَّخَذَتْ مِن دُونِهِمْ حِجَابًا. She adopted a hijab from them. But the hijab here seems to be a screen, something that will give her some privacy. So the same thing seems to be at work here in the Surah 33 verse, Surah 33 verse number 53.
So it's not talking about hijab as in a piece of clothing, a piece of cloth that one wears over one's head.
No, it's talking about a screen. So actually, the classical commentators on the Quran go to great lengths explaining this. They even mention what they call the sababun nuzul, the occasion of revelation, and that often is used to explain the verse, like what does the verse really mean. And the occasion, they say, is that the Prophet, peace be upon him, had just gotten married, and he held a banquet for his guests. And the guests came in some at a time, obviously because his home was not so huge. They came and ate in turns and left, ate and left. But some people remained there chit-chatting. And this verse is a long verse talking about this kind of chit-chatting. So the verse is saying basically, O you who believe, do not enter the home of the Prophet, peace be upon him, unless you're invited. And then too, don't come so early that you're watching over the food to see, when it's going to be done, when the cooking is going to be done. And then after you have eaten, depart right away. Don't stay, chit-chatting. And in any case, if you are to ask the wives of the Prophet, peace be upon him, for any goods, then you should ask them from behind a hijab. So that's the barrier that is a hijab. It is a screen. It's not that the women are going to be wearing certain clothing. They may, but probably, as referring back to a previous segment, we spoke about the house dress and the dress that you're going to wear when you go out. So probably the women are there with their regular house dress, and if it's convenient for them that there is a screen separating their private quarters from the living quarters of the Prophet, peace be upon him, or you might say the living room from the bedroom. We shouldn't imagine their homes to be like our 3-story.
Yeah, it's probably just one room.
Multi-room houses, with everything screened off with locked doors and everything like this. So it seems that it was just one open space, and this screen was dropped in order to create the separate space. Now, the narrative continues, Safiya. It says that with the guests being there, and before we get to the screen being implemented, the Prophet, peace be upon him, was perturbed by the presence of the guests who are lingering on. You know, after dinner guests, it's hard to get them to leave. So I mean, we all do that. We're after dinner guests too, and we enjoy the company so much, we stay on, we chat, sometimes forgetting how inconvenient that could be for the hosts. Anyway, the Prophet, peace be upon him, goes out. That should have been a signal, because the host is gone, but the guest is still there. Anyway, when he comes back, guests are still there. So he goes out again and comes back, and the guests are still there. So eventually they got the point, and they left. And Anas, the boy who was an apprentice to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, relates the story. He says that right then and there, the revelation had come to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and the Prophet, peace be upon him, dropped a screen, a hijab, between him, Anas, and the family of the Prophet, peace be upon him.
So, Dr. Shabir, the question I have then is this situation applicable to Muslim women in their interactions with men then? Should there be a screen, either, virtual or actual physical, between them?
Yeah, some people take this very literally. And I can relate stories about how, people have taken this literally and how it plays out in some Muslim contexts. But let me not go there for the moment. Let me just say that if we see that something good is being done by the wives of the Prophet, peace be upon him, or by the companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, more generally, we might say, okay, let's copy that. That seems to be a good thing. Those are our role models and so on. But to say that this is a requirement for everyone, this is going too far. Firstly, because it is very clear in the context of Surah 33 as a whole, and even right here in this same verse, that the wives of the Prophet, peace be upon him, are special. They're not like any other women. So in the present verse, the Quran is saying to the believing men, مَا كَانَ لَكُمْ أَن تُؤْذُوا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. It is not right for any one of you to hurt the messenger of God. وَلَا أَن تَنْكِحُوا أَزْوَاجَهُ مِن بَعْدِهِ أَبَدًا. And it is not right for any of you to marry any one of his wives after he dies. And then it continues to say that is going to be an enormity in the sight of God. So you can't do that. Now, you can see the situation if one of the Muslim believing men should fall in love with one of the women or desire to marry one of them, and then this could lead to great consternation within the community, because this is something already declared to be forbidden for the men. So as an added precaution, the women of the wives of the Prophet, peace be upon him, had to behave in a certain way that's unlike what is required of other women. Now, that's that verse itself that makes this already clear. But if that wasn't clear from the verse itself, within this surah, if we look at verses number 30 to 32, we will see that it is very clear there that the wives of the Prophet, peace be upon him, have special requirements. So verse number 30 says that if they were to commit any open lewdness, then their punishment will be double. And on the contrary, the next verse says, if they obey God and his messenger and do what is right, they will get double reward. And then the following verse, which is verse number 32 of that same surah, says that it's very plainly, لَسْتُنَّ كَأَحْدٍ مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ. You are not like any one of the other women. So it's very clear that there are specific rules for the wives of the Prophet, peace be upon him, when we cannot automatically extrapolate and say, because this was a rule for them, it becomes a rule for all Muslim women. If Muslim women see that there is something good in that applies to their situation and they do it, we'll see all well and good. But if this becomes burdensome for other people to apply, we can say, okay, you don't have that requirement. It was for the wives of the Prophet, peace be upon him, not necessarily for you.
Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Shabir. Next time we will look at the hadith that speak about women's head covering.
Sure, I look forward to that.
On behalf of Let the Quran Speak, I want to say thank you. You've helped us become the most widely watched Muslim TV show in Canada. I want to appeal to you to continue to support us. You can visit our website, QuranSpeaks.com. We also accept e-transfers to iGive at QuranSpeaks.com. And we're now on Patreon, so you can make a monthly contribution. May God bless you and your loved ones today and always.